Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with the Rattle Magazine, and happy Independence Day to all you out there who are Americans celebrating. This is the critique of the week. Thanks so much for being here. Expected a lighter crowd on hand, but it's looking pretty good. We got a good number of people here. It's always fun to do the critique, and the truth is that here in Houston, or outside of Houston where we are, we had a parade in the morning. We had a really wonderful Houston Symphony performance last night. We took all the kids to. We're going to fireworks tonight. But in the afternoon, around this time, in the heat of the day, everybody is kind of holed up in their air conditioning. And so there's really no reason to postpone it. I was just sitting here working anyway. So I'm glad that we could do this. I'm glad people are here watching. Let's see who is here today. And no worries if you couldn't make it. I know some people have, barbecues and whatnot. Mary Ellen Carr is here, though. David Vine. Terry Miller from right over in Houston. He knows the heat. Yeah, it's a sauna out there. Maney is here. Dee Coleman, Steve Horrell, Holly York. Yeah, Sandra Fees is here. Morgan Feeney, Nancy Tennell, PMB, Steve Horrell, I already said. Tara Meslick McMahon. Nancy Tennell, I already said. Janet McConaughey. PMB, Tom Barlow. Megan Pasconi, Sarah Rashid Khan, Dick Westheimer. Hey, Dick. Coming in from the outside, I'm sure. Danette Burmey is here. Sean Evaningo Sanders. Rose Lennard. Yeah, so great crew on hand. Thanks, everybody. We're going to do things a little bit different. I decided I'm starting to get... There's too much of the repetitive stuff. And this is the last time we're going to go through the submissions, which it is fun to see how we do submissions, but I want to go into more depth moving forward. So we're going to go back to a model where I pick things out more carefully, and then some things, the kind of poems that just have the general advice. I think I might send just a form letter saying, hey, watch a past critique, and that'll help, read more poems, give some general advice. There's some way I'm going to handle it that's a little different. And we'll try to dig a little deeper, because lately we've been sort of stuck at the surface level that so many poets need, really. We have such a wonderful group of people that come here every week. We got to dig deeper into poems. So I'm going to make that a focus moving forward in some way. Haven't figured out exactly how, which is why we're doing this the standard way. And I figured there wouldn't be many people here, so I thought I'd just move really quickly and try to do sort of a lightning through the oldest submissions here. They're coming back from January. And kind of moving on fast, but giving what advice, what kind of prescriptions we can provide for these good folks who've shared their poems with us, hoping to get better. Let's see. Yeah. And let's take a look at this first one. The first poet is Nicholas Kolinski from Bolzano. Is that Brazil, maybe? Italy. Okay, from Italy. Nicholas Kolinski. And 2 poems here. Let's take a peek. This first one is, drowned corpses always speak with themselves. Drenched and wrecked, a poet digs inside this empty body of his, inside this empty hold sins, in search of what unfound lay hijacked. A glimpse, a heart, a will, all yet unforgiven and forbidden, an ancient vessel, illusion that swims hidden. In deep black oceans never wandered by any traveler, nor explored by any lonely lover. Thus, so far below has it settled. And that's the end of the poem. So drowned corpses always speak with themselves. So we do have some images, drenched and wrecked. A poet digs inside this empty body. The use of this is a little confusing. A poet digs inside this empty body of his, inside this empty hold sins. I mean, just the syntax is a little off there. The positive of this poem is that we do have some images that we can sort of anchor to and see, and that helps make the poem feel a little more contextual. Intriguing title, as Rose Lennard says, yeah. And Sarah Rashid Khan, at the same time, Jinx, says, the title intrigued me. I was expecting the poem to talk about it more in the body of the poem. Yeah. So we have this title that sets it up. We have Drench and Wrecked. And then we're talking about a poet. And then we sort of lose track of what's going on. In search of what's unfound lay hijacked. So that's a good metaphor for what poetry does. A glimpse, a heart, a will, all yet unforgiven and forbidden, an ancient vessel. So now we went from the drowned corpses, the detail of that, to really vagueness. And so the problem with so many poems is vagueness. And I think what we're going to do, I don't know. I mean, I think what I'm going to do moving forward is look through and just have some kind of list or some kind of group of form letters and say, like, doesn't provide context, is too vague, watch past critiques of the week. And one of the things that happens so often is we don't have details. We don't have a real story. We go into these vague ideas: a glimpse, a heart, a will, all yet unforgiven and forbidden, an ancient vessel, illusion that swims hidden. And we have the rhyme here that's sort of hijacking, no pun intended, the poem in this section. And yeah, we need some commas, but yeah, tell your story with details, as Winston Moen said, and the story's just not told here. We don't understand. In deep black oceans, never wandered by any traveler, nor explored by any lonely lover, thus so far below has it settled. Like, we don't understand what's going on. Holly York says, I'm a bit disoriented by the syntax, and exactly, yeah. Danette Bermia says, I want to know what the corpses say. Sandra Fee says, I like the hard sounds, and yeah, I like that aspect of it too. There's some things to like in the poem. There's some details. There's a sense of sound, which is nice. Yeah, Dry Montito said the title spoke at the level of symbol and got me hooked. The first stanza moves it to metaphor immediately with poet. I'd like it if it just dove into the dead bodies as such and moved to metaphor later. Yeah. Yeah, and PMB says, I wonder if the tendency toward vagueness comes from trying to make something personal sound universal. And that's exactly true, and that's why we end up saying the same thing over and over again. But there's a sense that if we need to be general to make people want to understand and appreciate it, and yet the truth is, connecting with a poem, connecting with a piece of art, is making it very personal and idiosyncratic and individual. And the uniqueness of that, the uniqueness of your voice and vision, and all the actual details that make it different from every other experience are what we're interested in. And that's how you actually connect and make it generalized. It's through specificity, not through generality. And that's just a mistake that happens over and over again. Let's take a look at the other poem that this poet sent. This is Apollineus. Apollineus? Is that different from Apollineus? Apollineus. I was thinking about the whole, let's see. So I'm Googling here. Yeah, ever relating to Apollo. So it's just like a different spelling, I guess. Apollineus can refer to several things. The Greek god Apollo. Yeah, so just, okay. It's spelled a little different. I'm usually seeing an I in there instead of an EUS. But that doesn't really make a difference. Okay, so Apollo, the Greek sun god. And I was thinking about this actually not too long ago, because there was one lecture in a writing class that I think of it because I got arguing with the professor a little bit too much, which was my tendency back in the college days, about it's the Nietzschean dichotomy between Apollonian and Dionysian, in the idea that there's order, one is the ordered side, one is the chaos side. And what occurred to me just the other day thinking about this was how much that Nietzschean duality is just the bifurcated brain of Ian McGilchrist and that whole thing we talk about, and how that, whereas Nietzsche would talk about, music and dance and those kind of arts is Dionysian and more emotionally centered. It's really that master versus his emissary dichotomy in the models you already have. And Apollineus would be the models that pre-exist in the left side of the brain. But anyway, let's see what this poem says. Apollineus. Drunk in it I swallow broken sins of a mind so shallow, teardrops crawling over me like disease, spreading their long-lasting fever out all over the seas. Flying doves took for granted mirrors of crows and mere confusion. This dark chaos was not ever wanted, but the mind provokes the illusion of soft dreams and the tender flash of innocent truths in the nightly ash. So here we do have a formal poem, and we have a shape too, and also the rhyme structure is consistent, which is nice. The last poem diverted into rhyme for a brief bit and then left. We have this. Then we have ending in the couplet, the rhyme in the last couplet, and but then again, the same issue is that it becomes so general like overgeneralizing to the point where we're not really interested as readers, and that's the problem. When you say teardrops crawling over me like disease, we need to know what caused the teardrops. We need to know the story, to be interested. Otherwise, we don't actually care. And it may sound cruel to not care, but we need to know what the story is to care about the story. It's just you have to know the story in order to care. And we don't, and so we can't really connect with it, even though we hear, and that's really what everybody means when they say show, don't tell. Being told that there are tears, we have to evoke the tears. We have to make that feeling come about, and you do that by telling the story, letting us enter the poem, and finding our way through from that direct perspective of being engaged as if we're the speaker. Then we can connect empathetically to the voice of the poem, and we don't get that here. It's too vague. We don't get the backstory. We need story. And again, even non-narrative poems need story, which is a strange thing to say, but I believe it to be true. All right. Well, thanks for sharing those. Hopefully that was helpful to the poet, and thanks for sharing, Nicholas Kolinski. Let us take a gander at the next poem. Now we have here Russ Kapali from Michigan. And Russ sent this January 18th, so not too long, well, 6 months ago at this point. Two pretty relatively short, skinny type poems anyway. Here we go. This is Under the Tallest Pines. Let me see if, just a thank you under general questions, so you're welcome. Russ coming up, Russ Kapali. No general questions. Let's take a peek. Under the tallest pines in the northeast corner of my father's woodlot. His axe and saw are proofed in pitch. The gas oil mix in the red tin can spoiled by now. Yesterday I stood on the spot where he fell like one of his trees. The airy boughs parted rose-smudged clouds. He did not come down. Soft needles, 5 to a bract, succumbed to the wind's ancient theme. I heard nothing from him. Felt no shudder, no touch, but there a giant pine trunk lay on the ground. And when he climbed it, there was no scorch or rot, only the clean natural cleave in its stump, and a lovely cerement of brambles, blackberries, and ferns covering it. He left me these woods, and they're there to be worked. So I gotta shrink this a little bit. It's a little big. Okay. I'll refresh the gas, file the chain, and hone the axe to a silvery shine. And there's a fragrant new pair of red wings still in their box. His size and mine too. I will break them in. How many steps would it have taken him? Eventually I will get there. Then maybe one day when I'm lacing them up, I will feel his hands on mine, and in my ear like a slip of wind. Good job, son. Yeah, so there's some, Danette Burmia says there's some beautiful imagery and details. Sean Evidingo Sanders says lovely language and images. And there is, if you listen, one of the things, and you might not realize this, but listening to me read cold the poem, which is how everybody encounters your poem for the first time. It's very rare, although it happens, so I shouldn't say everyone, but it's very rare that the person actually hears a poem first time read by the poet. You hear it in your own voice, being read to yourself. And so where I stumble, where is where I lose my train of thought because I daydream and I stop paying attention because it gets a little dull, or where the lines aren't as strong, and just you can listen to someone read your poem for the first time, and so go back and look at the reading and look at where I started to stumble a little bit in reading, and that's where it got a little dull. And I think that happens a lot. There's a great opening to the poem. All the images come through, but then it gets a little too long, and we sort of get bored halfway. So I think the main thing is to cut it up a little bit, shrink the poem, and then we'll have a stronger piece here. So let's think about where we can break that off, because it's just a bit of cutting. It just goes on a little too far in the middle. Under the tallest pines in the northeast corner of my father's woodlot. And great detail in that. It's a really wonderful title because it shows so much. It gives so much of the context. We know even the father's there. We know where we are outside. We know there's pines. And then we know who the he is. His axe and saw are proofed in pitch. And that's a really nice rhythm. That's almost there's a Robert Frost type sound. His axe and saw are proofed in pitch. I mean, the pentameter or the iambic meter is really strong there. The gas oil mix and the red tin can spoiled by now. And then, it's the red tin can. We talk about how the color is the weakest adjective, the weakest way to describe something. But occasionally it's nice to get a detail when it's relevant. And the gas oil mix and the red tin can spoiled by now, that gives it just a little bit of a spark, a little bit more detail, a nice touch. Yesterday I stood on the spot where he fell like one of his trees. And we already know it's the Father, so we know the significance of this. The airy boughs parted rose-smudged clouds. He did not come down. Soft needles, 5 to a bract, succumbed to the wind's ancient theme. I heard nothing from him, felt no shudder, no touch. But there a giant pine trunk lay on the ground. When had he limbed it? And so really, touching because we know what's going on here. There was no scratch, no rod, only the clean natural cleave in it, and in its stump, and a lovely cerement of brambles, blackberries, and ferns covering it. He left me these woods. So at this part, I think this description is the first one that gets a little bit too long, I think. Yeah, and somebody already pointed out, I looked down and hadn't seen, but do not need covering it. I think this... a lovely cerement of brambles and blackberries. That's enough. Like, let it just be those two and don't be covering it. It gets a little bit long, and that's almost like a prelude to how, we sort of spin our wheels a little bit later in the poem, slightly. Like, it's the first hint that we're going to go on a little bit too long. He left me these woods. They are to be worked. I'll refresh the gas, file the chain, and hone the axe to a silvery sheen. The silvery shine, that's too much. I'd cut that too. If we're going to keep this, I'm not even sure about keeping this whole section. And there's a fragrant new pair of red wings still in their box. A fragrant new pair of red wings still in their box. His size is mine too. I will break them in. How many steps would it have taken him? Eventually, I will get there. Then maybe one day when I'm lacing them up, I will feel his hands on mine, and in my ear like a slip of wind. Good job, son. And really, I think it's this whole end section. I think if we just gave us the image and the thing to think about, maybe it's the shoes, the Red Wings. What if we just cut? Let's see. What if we said, he left me these woods and a fragrant new pair of red wings still in their box. And then, let's see, and cut right to, still in the box. I'm lacing them up. And some, maybe I will feel his hands on mine. Not quite the way to close that. I think there's a better way to describe that. But the feeling of how I'm lacing them up in the same way he would have laced them up, and then just ended the poem there. I think and as Morgan Phoenix says, I like the Red Wings and the idea of flight. So what I would do is take this whole last section and just I think what happened is we ended up wanting to explain too much and not having really faith in the reader to get the significance of it, but we do. And holding back, the restraint of that really adds more than explicating all the thoughts. D. Coleman said, I would love this poem to end with a line, he left me these woods. And I thought of that too. I wondered if we could cut, and ferns covering it, and then just end, he left me these woods. I don't think that would do quite enough, although I'm wondering if there's a way we could work that in toward the end. Let's see. Yeah, Brian O'Sullivan says, and we're lacing them up together. I think maybe, want to do like, I'm lacing them up with the motion that he would have made, or the way he would have, that kind of, to get a sense. And that's one of those things, maybe we need a metaphor there, something to play with, but something make it tangible too. Yeah. When I lace them up, I feel his hand, said Sean. But yeah, there's something like that. So really the gist, if we look at the whole poem, wonderful opening, and the descriptions are great. We know the weight of it and the importance of the poem. And then the second half, or maybe the last the last third, ends up a little too long. And we want to cut. Yeah. Ali Rowland says, yes, cut the end, but add some clarification about how the father's death was not like the tree falling. Yeah. Maybe we could go back to there, too, as a way to move in the poem. It's just not quite finished. It's not the right ending. Marianne Carr said, this sounds like it could be a collection on grief. That last stanza is too good to discard. I'm not sure what you mean by the last stanza, because it's all one stanza. Yeah, Holly York says, lovely illustration of carrying on in his father's footsteps. And yeah, that is the lovely thing about the poem. I completely agree. And it's just the case of, again, showing that rather than telling that. Because we... I will break them in. How many steps would it have taken him? Eventually I will get there. Eventually I will get there. And then maybe one day when I'm lacing them up, it's just, it goes on with a lot of explication. And we just want to let it sit there with the image. Yeah, Terry Miller says maybe an ending that brings the reader's emotional investment into the turn. Yeah. So I don't know. So it's one of those, just cut to the image and let that show it. And how you exactly do that takes some play. And there's some suggestions. People are giving good advice in the comments. I don't know, like not being in the sort of the space of the poem and not feeling the emotional weight in a direct way. Like you're trying to show us, the reader, the emotional weight, so it's sort of easy to come up with like cliched, easy kind of ways to do it, but we want something surprising and interesting. But you could think like I, lace up the red wings and walk in the steps that I can't see, but know he took, like that kind of thing. Like his footprints are there beneath the dirt, but I can't see them, but I still step in them, or that kind of sense of it, Anyway, that's where I'd go with this one. It's just a great start to the poem. Yeah, good start, as Terry said at the exact same time I said that. Okay. Nancy Snell says, in my ear, like a slip of wind, his affirmation. That's almost a haiku. That's nice. All right, let's look at the other poem. Again, the poet is Russ Kapali from Michigan. This is Piety. The footprints I left in the snow today when I went down to check the mail, then climbed back up to my mountain shed are the best I ever made. They're straight ahead, forever toes over heel, or favor toes over heel, as an animal's length through the pines, crystal air between. Now it's snowing again, and we'll cover them all. Such joy. Tomorrow I get to try the same. So I like the concept of this poem too. I like Piety. I think it's sort of a smaller version of the same issue and the same structure. I think and this is why we do two poems, to see if the tendencies repeat themselves. And I think here, again, wonderful opening. Piety is an extended metaphor through the poem, is great. So it's a good title again. And then we get images that start really well. The footprints I left in the snow today when I went down to check the mail, then climbed back up to my mountain shed are the best I ever made. And then I think that's really wonderful. It's surprising to characterize them as the best they ever made. And it sort of begs the question of what makes them the best. And then that's answered. So it does a great job of piquing our curiosity and then fulfilling that curiosity. They're straight ahead, favor toes over heel, as an animal's length through the pines. And I think that's really wonderful. The crystal air between, I don't really see. I think that's a weaker description than the rest of the description, so I would cut that. But then we get now it's snowing again and we'll cover them all. And that, there's something, because it's snowing again, and the snow will cover them all, and it will cover them all. There's a missing, which is why I tripped over it when I read it. There's a missing, subject or whatever in that sentence. But then I think the poem maybe could just end there and get rid of such joy. Tomorrow I get to try the same. Why not? Now it's snowing again, and the snow will cover them all. Or maybe we could even end a little bit more again on the image, what it looks like as the snow covers them all. But why not let that hang there? There's a sense of joy already. So we have such a joy. Tomorrow I get to try the same. But the sense of joy is already there in appreciating that these are the best footprints they ever made. And so we don't really need to see that there's a joy. We don't need to be told that. We already knew that. And then how could there be joy when they're just going to be covered again? Dry Montijo says it's like a sand mandala, and that's really great. Yeah. So, yeah. And so to me, I think it could, as a little tight poem that works really well, I think that's a nice turn, a nice sense of movement, where we go to the joy of seeing how sort of confident they were, how straight ahead, the toes over the heel, as an animal's length through the pines. I think that's really wonderful. I think the poem's I think it's just a quick edit. So let me read it as I would have it and hear it. So Piety. And let me think, how would I do the end? Now it's snowing again. Let's see. I'm not quite sure because that last and we'll cover them all. Because I like now it's snowing again. And the snow, like repeating the snow or repeating it, sounds clunky and makes that line kind of long, given the feel of the other and the pace of the other line. So I think you do have to change that one line. But listen to it without ignoring that one little problem. Okay, Piety. The footprints I left in the snow today when I went down to check the mail, then climbed back up to my mountain shed, are the best I ever made. They're straight ahead, favor toes over heel, as an animal's length through the pines. Now it's snowing again. The snow will cover them all. And yeah. And I think that works, except for that one problem with the last line. What if now it's snowing again, filling them all? What if you just said that? And then the filling, Sean Evanio Sanders. Let the filling have multiple meanings. Yeah. Yeah. Sean had said, now more snow, my footsteps filling. Yeah. Let's read it that way, because it's such a short poem, it's easy to read again. So let's just listen. Piety. The footprints I left in the snow today when I went down to check the mail, then climbed back up to my mountain shed, are the best I ever made. They're straight ahead, favor toes over heel, as an animal's length through the pines. Now it's snowing again, filling them all. Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. Rachel Grief says, I think the end may be really important to tie this to the concept of piety. I don't think so. Because maybe an exclamation at the end, though. Maybe now it's snowing again, filling them all with an exclamation point, and then you could get back to that. And really the heart of the poem is the appreciation for that act. And then the fact that both that nobody notices and it'll be covered up. You're the only one there to notice it. And that's what makes it piety, So it's a really nice metaphor for that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's it. Let's move on to another poem. And thanks for all your thoughts. Okay. We'll move on. And the next poet is Kristoff Greor from Bratislava. And that is in SK. Which country is SK? It only gives country codes now. Slovakia. Okay. Yeah, so Kristoff Greor from Slovakia. This one from January 19th. No general questions. A couple poems. Short first one. This is called Stray Matter, which is in the title. I tell people all the time to, just when you're submitting, be sure to put the title in the document itself, because the way Submittable works, and everybody uses Submittable or some other variant these days, it'll open up the document without the title listed, and it gets confusing as to where the poem is, where it ends, what the title is. And here we have the document's called Like a Man, the submission was called Stray Matter, and there's 2 poems, so I don't know what this poem's actually called. I guess it's called Like a Man, but don't make us as editors guess. We want to know. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at this. I think it's called Like a Man. Make me feel a man, uncouth passion, desired bear. Take me like a Christian, invite sin. Onomantic game by the hand in quiet fashion. Skin so lush and thin to your bed. The tame sea of petals. My alms have me take you in vain. Blindfold you and tie your arms, clock the hours behind your back, like you trust me, a vampire at your neck. But before, pray tell, were my teeth first, or the name? Yeah. Okay, so for this one, I'm not sure to take it literally or to is it actually about a vampire or not? I'm not sure. But I like what I like about this poem. There are a couple of details I like. Were my teeth first or the name is a really great question. So I like that part. Yeah. To answer Odin's question here, who submit poems 2 weeks ago, do I wait or submit again? Yeah, definitely wait. I mean, they go in the order they were received. I'm trying to figure out ways to handle it, because we want as many people to participate and learn, but then also we want to move through and have it fun and educational for everybody who watches. So there's a balance always, but it's always going to be, I look at the poems first, no matter how we end up doing it moving forward. The oldest poems are the ones I'm going to look for at first. So, okay. So anyway. Yeah. So again, with this poem, I would say lack of clarity again. We don't know who the you is in particular. Make me feel a man, or who the me. Make me feel a man, uncouth passion, desire bear. Take me like a Christian, invite sin. Onomantic game. I don't know that word. I do like learning words, so thanks for teaching me a word. Let's see what this is. Onomantic is another word for nomancy, a form of divination that interprets a person's name to predict their future or reveal hidden characteristics. Okay, so that's interesting. Like a Christian invites sin, onomantic game by the hand. So we also have a lack of punctuation, making it difficult. There's no punctuation, and it's confusing which lines read through with enjambment and which don't, and so it makes it tricky to read. But then punctuation jumps in at the end too, with not only the question mark but the comma and the ellipses. But it just makes it so much easier to use punctuation unless you're very specific and there's reasons you don't want to, and then you're consistent with it. And so I would suggest adding punctuation to the whole poem. Just makes it easier to read. That's the point of punctuation. By the hand in quiet fashion, skin so lush and thin, to your bed the tame sea of petals. So who's bed and who's me? Is it just a vampire story? And if a vampire story, how is this better than reading the original vampire? What's the original vampire novel? Is it? I can't remember who wrote that, but or the Anne Rice. The Anne Rice. The Interview with the Vampire is great. Like, how does this add to the genre? If it is, and if it's more than that, if it's a metaphor or something for something going on in life, we gotta let us know. So what the question is, what the poem does. Why is it being written? If it's just a vampire with a victim in their bed, then that's not enough to make it add to the genre. And if it's more than that, we don't know. So we're kind of don't know what to take from this poem. It's one of those ones where we're not actually lost. We're just lost with respect to what the point is. My arms have me take you in vain, blindfold you and tie your arms, clock the hours behind your back. See, certain lines are interesting. Clock the hours behind your back is interesting. Like you trust me, and we don't know who you is, so why would we expect you to trust me or not? A vampire at your neck, but before, pray tell, were my teeth first with a name? And again, I like that last line, that question there. There could be a poem in there, but we need more surrounding it. Okay, let me take a look at the other one. And this again, this is called The Cup, probably, or maybe Stray Matter. I don't know. Translucent fluid in my half-finished cup, in numbers mugged of any flavor, much like the nightly delight. Indigo flowers and cigarette lovers and desolate mornings. My evening primrose turned to sunray daisy, independent sorrow I cling to it still, clanking the fervor of serrated thrills, knives stabbing with pleasure, but then exiting the wound, ill conceit and rude, peeking through the glass, I drink with inbred class, sugar and water, raising the flask, asking for a straw, missing. So again, I just don't know who's doing what. So the who, what, why, where, when, and how. It was missing in the last poem. We just don't know who's talking, or why, or what the significance is. Pathetic and coarse, I'm the king pleading for a horse in exchange for my kingdom. So that seems like a metaphor for something, but we don't know what. We don't know what the story is. So tell the story. Let us know what's going on. We're going to move on to other poems to get through as many as we can. Next up is Miam Nelson from New York. So 2 poems unnamed, so at least we know that they're untitled here. And they're kind of short, skinny poems. Anyway, let's take a look. General questions? Any general questions? Name suggestions? Okay, so if you can come up with any titles, she's asking for help there, and or tips and things to consider for naming poems. That's a good one we haven't talked about in a bit. For poem number 1, the last few stanzas kind of break from the previous form pattern. Does that negatively impact it? How might you suggest forming those lines to make as much sense as possible, both in terms of music and meaning to the story scene I'm telling? Okay, well, very good questions. Thanks for sharing those. As of yet unnamed, poem number 1. Here we go. Elbows broken. I'm calling it that for now. Elbows broken and bent, frame the long and elegant female, her torso crooked and out the way, boxed within invisible walls, with raven's hair, a lion's mane, the eyes that pretend to see the lightless sky, golden like her skin once was, but is now akin to snow, and stoic fortitude. She receives his pretty words on her lips, not like the tallow which feeds them and leaves her belly starved of proper nutrition. And a piano sits, all quiet and alone in the corner of the room like her soul. And her feral tears store themselves like clothes or winter jewelry, dangling from her ears and frame with focused concentration, her need to be kissed, a thing which has a scent and erodes from her sideburns. She smells it, becomes saddened, and finally sheds a tear for her unnamed or mated heart. And so I think, like similar poems, I found it difficult to connect because I don't quite know who or what the situation is. We talk about this frequently when we talk about titles, but the title is a place you can add something useful. And a lot of times that ends up being details within the poem that you don't want the speaker of the poem to have to say. So we can set up the situation with that. Other times, like we saw with Piety, titles can make a great extended metaphor, so you know how to access the deeper symbolism that the poem is actually working on. That's one way to go. Other times, there can be a kind of a haiku-like leap where it's a different direction talking about the same topic that makes it interesting. Also, titles are the first thing that a reader reads, so making them interesting and not boring is something helps. There's just a way you can use titles, and given the poem and the situation, what you need, just trying to make the most of it is the goal. There's no like one rule about what a title should be, but it's a wasted opportunity if it does nothing. And so for this one, I don't know who the female is or where we are in time and space. I mean, and so that, I think that could be solved if that said, I don't know, Sylvia Plath sits on the couch, then we know like where we are. Or if it says, I stare at myself in the mirror after my boyfriend dumped me, then we know where it is and we know who I am, and so that can really help. So that kind of title that sets the context so we can appreciate what's going on in the poem, that's what I would go for with this one. Let's read it again and look more carefully. Elbows broken and bent frame the long and elegant female. Her torso crooked and out the way. The out the way, I guess out of the way it should be. That missing of trips me up. Boxed within invisible walls. And so first, the beginning details. Elbows broken and bent frame the long, elegant female. Like, okay, her torso crooked and out of the way. And so I'm starting to imagine like what's being painted here is the scene. But then I get to boxed within invisible walls with raven's hair. But the invisible walls, I don't know what to make of them. So I'm sort of like, I have like 100% of my brain processing power working on understanding the poem. And then when I get to invisible walls, I don't know what that means. It's an abstraction when we haven't established what the actual situation is. So then I have to like set apart, like sandbox 20% of my brain. It's like, what's the invisible wall? Keep an eye on that. Like, what might that mean? While continuing with the raven's hair, which goes back to the description, a lion's mane and eyes that pretend to see the lightless sky. So I still have this invisible walls. Like, what does that mean? Trying to figure that out as a mystery. And then I've learned that it's raven black hair, like a lion's mane all around, and eyes that pretend to see the lightless sky. And I'm wondering why the sky is lightless. So it's this building this like mystery of just specific details that you could tell me. Like, it's not a mystery of like what it means, which is the good kind of mystery. It's the mystery of like what is actually going on. I'm not sure what the invisible walls mean, what the lightless sky is. So it's sort of building up this sort of, frankly, it's annoying not to know details that you could tell me. And that's the feel of it at this point. Golden like her skin once was, but is now akin to snow in stoic fortitude. So at this point, I'm thinking the lightless sky, it's night. She's outside and was murdered, and the hair like a raven lion's mane is there, maybe. She receives his pretty words on her lips, not like the tallow which feeds them and leaves her belly starved of proper nutrition. And so that's such a specific detail that, but why? The tallow feeds her lips. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess her belly starved of proper, is she like anorexic? Is that what's going on here? I don't know. And a piano sits all quiet and alone in the corner of the room, and suddenly we're in a room. So I end up being lost, even though there's some nice details that they don't connect. And her soul is sitting in the corner of a room, like her soul, and her feral tears store themselves like clothes or winter jewelry. And that's italicized like nutrition and not in invisible walls. I don't know. It's one of those poems that lays itself out. We'll keep going. Dangling from her ears and with focused concentration. And why are these words? I'm starting to wonder why these words are italicized. Her need to be kissed. Is she dead or not? I'm just not sure. A thing which has a scent and erodes from her sideburns. She smells it, becomes saddened, and finally sheds a tear for her untamed or mated heart. And I can't put it together. And you see, that was my best effort at putting it together right there, and I just can't. Yeah. Winston Munn says, I don't know what or why it's happening, and soon I don't care. And that's the thing. Lisa Seidenberg says, domination of female. Jeanette Burmia says, sounds like drinking a fancy Kool-Aid. Lisa Seidenberg says, read more poems. Yeah. I mean, we just got to get the story out. and we can't be this lost. We don't want to be lost. I mean, we put it down and we never read a poem. We don't read the next poem either when we're this lost. Dick Westheimer says, given the two poems together, it really feels like the poet is working out his fantasies. This is less about experience than some weird ideal. Tara Meslick McMahon says, maybe try a prose poem instead. Doing that might show better what's missing, what's too much. Yeah. Isn't tallow related to candles, or do I have something wrong? I was thinking the tallow, tallow is the beef fat. I was thinking it's some kind of like lip balm maybe, but I don't know. Yeah, PNB says sounds like a serial killer. I just don't know. We don't know what's going on. And if we... Oh, Danette says it is beef fat used in candle making or eaten. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. So we're just lost. And if we're lost, we don't care. And that's just the bottom line. And these are the kind of things I think I'm just going to say over email or in a reply from now on, because we just can't be lost. You got to let us know what's actually going on. Wasn't there a second poem? Yeah. So that was only the first of two. Yeah. So Dick was talking about the last poet too, the vampire. That was a different poet. This poet is Miriam Nelson from New York. And the second poem here is Gently. Let's see if it has the same issues. If we can find some kind of anchor, something that where we know what's going on, then we can use that to pull ourselves up into the world and make more of the poem. But if we don't know what's going on, we can't. And that's why, like I said, the title revealing some of the context can be really helpful. Okay. So this next one is Gently. Gently, well, it's untitled. Gently. And that's just an artificial break. Sometimes the preview breaks at the wrong places. Gently, pierced lids clothe the windows buried in my being. Like these lovely white and blue floral curtains, an old angel's home. My body finds its soul the way it finds this gazebo, aged and pure, waiting, searching for its reflection in the lake it overlooks. So here, there's some really lovely, a sense of music in the rhythm and the sounds. There's a real dance of the words within your mouth as you read these. That's really nice. And then some really nice images and details too. Let me read it again. I'll point out the good ones. But again, we're a little bit, we could be helped by the title again. Gently pierced lids clothe the windows buried in my being, like these lovely white and blue floral curtains, an old angel's home. So I like this part a lot. Gently pierced lids clothe the windows. And it's an interesting description of the windows and the curtains there. And then it's a nice shift. The windows buried in my being. That's a really nice turn of phrase. The windows buried in my being like these lovely white and blue floral curtains. An old angel's home. So it's a really great setup. Has me intrigued. There's enough detail where I'm connected to it. My body finds its soul the way it finds this gazebo. Aged and pure, waiting. I'm not sure what the connection... Like all of a sudden we're in a gazebo. I thought we were looking at the curtains in a house. So there's a shift there that's a little hard to follow. And then my body finds its soul. Of course, the soul is always a trite word to use. We didn't mention it in the last poem, but it is. It's sort of, it becomes kind of empty in poetry very easily. But my body finds its soul the way it finds this gazebo. I think that's a nice turn of phrase and a good use. I think that's actually okay. Aged and pure, waiting... Okay, good description of the gazebo. Waiting, searching for its reflection in the lake it overlooks. So I don't understand how we got from the home to the gazebo. And I don't understand. I would like to just know more again. There's some really nice images and sounds that sort of lay out there. But I'm not sure. Let me see what other people are saying, if there's any suggestions that I don't have. But I'm still... Yeah, more... Megan Pescone says, a very pretty picture is being painted. Dry Montito says, like the idea of the gazebo, the soul. But yeah, Margaret Feeney's still a little bit lost. Let's see. We know the windows are a metaphor for something buried in her. Sarah Rashid Khan finds its soul is a cliche. Yeah, Sandra Fees, love the windows buried in my being. Morgan Feeney, some punctuation might help. I'm not convinced by Tim's reading necessarily. That's interesting. I didn't find trouble reading it. Yeah. I think Terry says, I find the gazebo the way my body finds its soul, as an edit to that. CB99 Video says, I'm on a dock now at someone's lake house, and they have a gazebo. Maybe the gazebo for the title. Yeah, I would like to I don't think this gazebo is a title, but if we just situate the speaker, then we can enjoy the poem a lot more. Visiting a friend's house or my aunt's house who passed away last year or something, like just whatever the situation is, I'd like to know a little bit so we can feel more attached, because it really is nice images. Dry Montilla says punctuation is so helpful. English words often don't have a part of speech until they are placed in a sentence. So knowing the boundaries of the sentence makes reading so much easier, and that's definitely true. Brian Sullivan says, nerdy grammar point. I think it and its in the last stanza are unclear as to what noun they're referring to. Yeah. Nancy Sebenik says, poem needs a transition from the house to the gazebo. Yeah. Hal York says, an old angel's home, deceased friend or relative. Yeah, that's why I said, like, my aunt's, inheriting my aunt's house or something like that. I mean, I just like to know that the situation, and then we connect to it. And then the leap from the house to the gazebo is a little disorienting, so it'd be nice to know and have some connection there. Otherwise, I like it, I like ending on the gazebo, searching for its reflection in the lake it overlooks, too. I like the understatedness of that. Morgan Phoenix says, I just don't know what pierced lids mean. Like eyes, the lids of jars, something else? Yeah, that is a little hard to see. Gently pierced lids clothe the windows. And I imagine, I guess, something hanging in the windows. Like some kind of, I don't know, or maybe like candles that are in the windows sometimes, or I don't know. I imagine something kind of hanging in the windows, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anyway, that's my choice. Just give us a setting, and then the poem would work better. I don't really have any other edits other than that, because I think it's pretty nice otherwise. So thanks for sharing that. Again, those two poems were Miam Nelson from New York. Thanks for sharing that, Miam. All right, let's take a look. We'll do one more poet before we head off to our barbecues and whatnot. Having some burgers on the grill. Here we go with an interesting format. Two poems by Mary Fontana from Seattle. No general questions. And Instagram, if you want to check Mary out. Mary Fontana Writes over at Instagram. And the first poem is The Locks. It comes with an epigraph. Seattle. Let me shrink this a little bit. Fit it in. Okay. Seattle's Ballard Locks take boats from the salt water of the Puget Sound to the fresh water of Lake Washington, 20 feet above sea level. A parallel fish ladder allows for passage for spawning salmon. So that's an interesting fact. Okay, the locks. And that situates us. We know where we are. Like we were talking about with the last poem, a title to ground us would just help us appreciate the poem more. I think, yeah. So the locks. And then this interesting structure. I'm going to assume it has to do with the fish ladder. So let's see. The day the neighbor phoned awash with pain, the day we grasped at rippling Chinook, 6 deep in the fish ladder, dappled like green granite, we hurried back to take to the emergency room. Small talk in the car where with difficulty he undoubled managed interests of the fish, dropped his phone, which we brought by later with water and a bag of snacks, the salmon home by smell, but will not climb the lake until it rains, rare here in summer, plunging the temperature, bursting down concrete to where harbor seals wait to pluck each fish's liver. We didn't know, oh well, our kids played sometimes, we picked them up that evening, fed them sculled across hours, said their dad would be back soon. You can meet somebody at street level for years and sink no deeper till a gut punch drops you or him through ground you thought was solid. In this way, calamity can be an opening, a cataract, the ladder, fish firing themselves up as cold clatters at last. The humans and the boats accept their tethers. Imagine burden as ballast, setting the belly of what comes, some mechanism unseen catching the teeth of that great ancient interlocking that will not let us plummet. Imagine the massive gates swinging inward, the ocean's softened edge, the harbor seals acknowledging their bested, the vessel tested, the body weak perhaps with striving, slipping into the lake's hands like a gift. Survival of the toughest had its run. These days no leaper reaches home without a lift. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, Rachel Grief says, I'm already interested. Yeah, Holly York says, oh gosh, I don't like this placement on the page. Hammett Malik says, likes the, I think the humans and the boats accept their tethers. Michael Antrobus says it's 3 columns in one, each column read individually or the way Tim read it. I'm not sure. I thought that was the case. I always wonder with poems like this, does that work? Because I was glancing it to see if we should, and I didn't think so. The day the neighbor phoned awash with pain, 6 deep in the fish ladder, dappled, to the emergency room, small talk undoubled, manage interest in the fish with water and a bag of snacks, the salmon until it rains, rare here in summer, plunging to where harbor seals wait to pluck each fish's. I don't think it works that way. And I think that, you sort of have to wonder how to read it when you encounter a poem like this. We've seen, especially on the Rattlecast lately, we've seen Christiana Doucette's interesting poems that have the different dance patterns you can do. There are those Sudoku by Kat Lehman that are interesting. And there's other poems like this, too, that you don't quite know how to read them. And then you have to learn how to read them, too. But my feeling aligns with Rachel Greaves on this. Like the poem, but the format doesn't help it. Sandra Fee says, so many amazing lines. I got lost kind of midway and the format is confusing. Yeah, to me, because it doesn't work, it would be an amazing poem, like an award-winning kind of poem if it did work down and across, but that's really hard to do, which is what would make it amazing. It doesn't work that way. So really it's only a visual concrete metaphor for the locks that really doesn't have anything to do with the poem. And so I think it detracts more than it adds to put it in this format. The other thing is, as Ali Rowland says, I was interested in the O story, but that seems to get lost in the ending. And Danette Burmia says, when O went to the ER is where I got lost. Winston Munn says, I find the format helps me concentrate on the words. Interesting. John Victoria says, I think the white space in the middle is important in this format, so the lines are too long and overlap ruin the idea. The way Submittable works, these are the lines. This is not a thing that's varied based on the page. It's not like HTML. And so this is the way it was submitted. This is the way it looks in the document, I believe. But I could be wrong. In any event, the fact that it exemplifies the locks, I guess. Although I have trouble, my experience with locks is the Erie Canal. I grew up near the Erie Canal. There's a bunch of locks along there. I'm having trouble seeing those locks unless they're a different kind of locks. I see the fish ladder kind of it's swerving back and forth because that's kind of like a little series of waterfalls back and forth, like switchbacks on a mountain that let the salmon climb up. A cataract ladder is a nice way to think about it. So that's the metaphor, I think, but just putting the poem in that shape doesn't really add a lot. Morgan Phoenix says there's something there just needs to be clear. I think maybe I like the idea. Danette Burmia says revising this to have shorter lines would help, and maybe that's the case. Maybe if we had shorter lines, And it was more of a, we have that poem, and maybe the reason why subconsciously I mentioned the Rattle Poetry Prize, we have that Tiana Clark poem, Equilibrium. You can look that up. And that's about finding the balance between two halves. And you do read it across the whole way, but it is about having, a division within yourself. And so exemplifying that on the page, it sort of works in the same way that this works too. The problem is that the poem itself needs more work, and it's too difficult to read. So I think those are the two things. Yeah. And Nancy Semanek said, I think it needs to get back to the sick neighbor sooner. Let's read it again, because I too got lost. I lost this thread of the story a little bit while reading it. Let's take one more look. The day, and this is going to be a bit, it's a bit long to read, but we're going to read it again. The day the neighbor phoned awash with pain, the day we gasped at rippling Chinook 6 deep in the fish ladder. I love that description. Dappled like green granite. We hurried back to take O to the emergency room. Small talk. I don't know why just identifying with a pronoun there instead of O. The O, as soon as you see that, you really, for a second, because of the structure, you don't know if it's naming the person O or if this is an O, like a Shakespearean kind of O. You don't know how to take that O. And then you realize that it's using the name, and then you think, well, why can't we use the real name? And it adds a lot of questions for no reason. And I wonder if not just using a pronoun there and for the rest of the poem to talk about the neighbor and then the neighbor occasionally to re-engage with the actual noun. I think that may be a cleaner read that way. But O to the emergency room, small talk in the car where with difficulty he undoubled, managed interest in the fish, dropped his phone, which we brought. So how these are woven together is confusing. Managed interest in the fish. I'm not sure. Dropped this phone, which we brought by later with water and a bag of snacks. The salmon, home by smell, will not climb to the lake. See, if we had, and I wonder if it I don't know, is meant to be that way, even though it shows up this way. It shouldn't be different in the formatting for width. But if we had the neighbor story on one side and the salmon on the other, and wove those through in a way that worked, I think it would be really cool. But the fact that the salmon are here and the neighbor comes, the salmon are on both sides, the neighbor are on both sides, and I don't know. I think there's a way to work this. It's really hard. It's a difficult thing to try to do, but I don't think it's done enough to justify it. Because it has, as Rachel Grief says, punctuation could help, because we only have capitals. That's our only hint at where sentences are, and that helps it be this disjointed narrative where we jump between two stories. But I don't know. I mean, if you could do it where the fish were on one side and the neighbor was on the other, and then they sort of merge by the end or something like that, that would be cool. Anyway, let's keep reading. In the car, where was I? Home by the smell, but will not climb to the lake until it rains. Rare here in summer, plunging the temperature, bursting down concrete to where harbor seals wait to pluck each fish's liver. That's really interesting. That those details are great. We didn't know, oh well, our kids played sometimes. We picked them up that evening, fed them, sculled across hours. Said their dad would be back soon. You can meet somebody at street level for years and sink no deeper. I like that metaphor too. Till a gut punch drops you or him through the ground you thought was solid. A really great description, an interesting way of phrasing that too. In this way, calamity can be an opening, a cataract, the ladder, fish flung themselves up as cold clatters down at last. The humans and the boats accept their tethers. Imagine burden as ballast, steadying the belly for what comes, some mechanism unseen catching the teeth of that great ancient interlocking that will not let us plummet. So the lock is a metaphor for that drop, that the relationship getting much deeper, through that kind of shock. Imagine the massive gates swinging inward, the ocean's softened edge. The harbor seals acknowledging they're bested. The vessel. So I think we lose a little bit if we're using this as an extended metaphor for that experience of not knowing the neighbor very well, and then we're sort of thrust into really knowing them deeply, which is really how life works. All your friends are acquaintances at first, Yeah, I think we lose it a little bit with the seals acknowledging their bested. I don't know how to apply that to the metaphor. The vessels tested, the body weak perhaps, with striving, slipping into the lake's hands like a gift. Survival of the toughest had its run. These days, no leaper reaches home without a lift. Yeah. And as Danette says, this has so much potential. I'd love to see a revision. Yeah. And I just think it's not quite developed enough with the story. I think maybe, I don't know. And I wonder too if this has been workshopped a lot. There's just so many great details, and the overall concept is really, really wonderful. And there's so much there. But I think maybe we stripped away in our revision too much of the story about the neighbor, where it feels like there's a conclusion. Like, I don't know if he survived. I'd like to know more about what happened to the neighbor, and then how can you make that fit with the overarching metaphor of the locks being like the way we're connected in life. Sandra Fee says, the ending makes me wonder if the neighbor didn't survive or what happened. And I'd like to see some of that. Yeah. Winston Munn says the ending lacks a tad, I think. I do. This is the kind of thing, sometimes I get a sense that this is over-workshopped and edited too much, and we just left out some important details. And if that's not the case, I think we should just tell the story a little bit more, let it play out. It feels rushed. It feels like this wonderful setup of a really profound, interesting poem that pulls out kind of too quickly. And, I'd like to get more. Tara Meslick McMahon says, Tim, what a poem called that reads across and down? There's a way to successfully practice this. I think they're called contrapuntal poems. And, we've had a few in Rattle that are interesting over the years. I think if you, there's another interesting one too that was we mentioned that the Tiana Clark poem. There was another interesting poem that works in a different way, and I thought about showing this, but maybe we should. I'm trying to see if there's, So here's a contrapuntal poem. This is by Vivian Huang, age 15, from the Last Ripa, and the actual Last Ripa. But see, in China, a mountain filled with jade rings and lush blessings, American dreams of suburban rooftops becoming a sea of aligned stars. You can read it that way. A farmer sows ambitious wishes of velvet beds sailing to New York. Hands catch wind-billowed tulips within a hopeful harvest. So just the details play out. But then in China, a farmer sows a mountain filled with ambitious wishes of jade rings and lush velvet beds sailing blessings to New York. American hands catch dreams of wind-billowed suburban rooftops becoming tulips within a sea of aligned stars, a hopeful harvest. And again, that was Vivian Huang. From the Ripa, that's an example of, and that's the more typical format of a contrapuntal poem. We've published a few. If you Google, just search for those in Rattle, and we're doing better with categories. We should eventually have everything categorized based on the type of poem too. But you can find, and that's the word to Google too, contrapuntal. But then there's another poem. Oh, and then her name is really hard to spell. So how am I going to find it? Because the title. It was a Rattle Poetry Prize finalist. I liked it a lot. And it's about being pregnant and not pregnant at the same time, being like Schrodinger's cat. What's the poem called? The two lines, the poem runs parallel in structure. What is it called? And then, I don't know how to look it up even. Because there's a bunch of poems called like Schrodinger's cat. I don't think it's called that. Like, is it superposition or something like that? Let's see, rattle.com. Superposition? There we go. This is the poem I'm thinking of. This was a Rattle Poetry finalist, I guess, in 2017 or 2016. Ingrid Jędrzejewski, Superposition of States. And this reads, and so it's actually the two poems just smushed together, and you'll see how you can't actually read it the right way, but then reading it this way, it's like you have sort of a split screen as the poem is going. And even if you could, I don't think she does read them at the same. How does she read these? Let's see. I'll see. I can't remember. But you could imagine the two halves of this poem being read, maybe like left and right sides of stereo, or like two people on a stage reading them at the same time because they're the same length as the story unfolds, and one is being pregnant and one's not. I think I guess the miscarriage, whether the baby lived or not. So even more heartbreaking. Let's hear how she reads it. Does she just go, well, let's see here.
Superposition of states.
He called it a thought experiment, a hypothetical
They call
scenario.
it a threatened miscarriage, a state of uncertainty.
Constructed to discredit the Copenhagen interpretation.
There is more bleeding than normal for pregnancy, but less
of quantum mechanics. The idea that quantum systems
than
exist
expected for spontaneous abortion. There is
in
nothing
a superposition of states until a measurement
that
is
can
made.
be done to change the outcome, but there are tests
Imagine a box containing a sample of radioactive
to determine
material.
what is happening. On 2 consecutive
A Geiger
days,
counter, a hammer, a vial of hydrocyanic
blood is
acid.
drawn from my veins, sent to the lab,
Yeah, we
and
won't read
analyzed.
this.
And
We
a
won't play the
cat.
whole poem.
If the radioactive
But you can imagine how it goes, and how the poem, the two sides exist in superposition. So this is a great example, though, and why I thought about maybe bringing it up, of the way, the form, if it's unusual, should really fit the subject matter. And this being about the superposition, about like that Schrodinger's cat question where my whole life is going to change one way or the other. There's two entire, worlds laid out before me that are overlapping in superposition. It's a wonderful poem. I actually argued this for this winning the Rattle Poetry Prize and lost to the other editors, to be honest, because I thought it was so fascinating and creative. But that's one way to do it, and just reading it, down while things are going in parallel is interesting too. And I wonder if that something can inspire something in this poem. But anyway, so if you want to go find that, just look up a superposition of states and Rattle, and you can read the rest of the poem. It's a really, really great piece. Anyway, those are some of the options for that. But I think the poem, the superposition of states poem is completely developed. There's two complete narratives that run in parallel through the whole poem that add up and feel like they have complete compelling arcs. And I think the problem here isn't necessarily the structure, although it would be interesting to see it go back and forth or play with it where it fits a little better. But it's the fact that the poem doesn't, the story isn't resolved fully. Like it just feels like it needs more storytelling going on. And, not knowing what happens to him. I just like to hear a full arc of the story. And I think something maybe got lost in editing, or maybe it just needs to be written. But I think but great poem, great details. And it's really compelling. I love the metaphor and the way it's put together. So that's that. Let's take one more. We're going to look at the other poem too. And here is this Love Letter to a Very Tall Man. Again, these poems are by Mary Fontana. Love Letter to a Very Tall Man. In the winter garden of my 25th year, the bulbs lay sleeping in their buried boats like the bodies of my ancestors, paper cloaked. From such ground no harvest coaxed, but the hypothetical, disembodied thoughts like orchids in ghostly bloom, ideas rising slender as Earth's final crop of wheat. Vision of pumpkin vines burned on the air, photographic negative of all that isn't there. Onto that silent roof, the hard hail of your feet. Landing made you clumsy, knocking branches spottable a mile off, desperate to furl the standard of your body, unstring its taut crossbow. Long-winged albatross at sea since you fledged the smack of your span among the common finches, shocked me from reverie. How I long to unbutton the conspicuous skin of you and let your heart float out. What did I know of wings, of bodies, things that beat? But you called me to the kingdom of concrete. Let us be now the ship and the sail, great kite on cross beams, anchors of iron. And when we die, these bodies will not spoil. They will fill us with cups and jewels, jars of oil. They will launch us into the ocean and set us on fire. Yeah. So, yeah. Fantastic title, says says Morgan Feeney. Ali Rowland, this is a great title. Lovely sound, says Hemet. Yeah, beautiful imagery, but very dense. Hemet Malik says, unbutton the skin of you. Yeah, Love Letter to a Very Tall Man. It is a very dense poem. Wonderful images again. I like the way the poet writes. Mary Fontana from Seattle once again. We'll read it one more time, looking for more detail. to talk about. In the winter garden of my 25th year, a really nice way to put that, the bulbs lay sleeping on their buried boats like the bodies of my ancestors, paper cloaked, from such ground no harvest coaxed. I think the cloaked and the coaxed, it gets a little bit trippy, a little too much language sound play going on. From such ground no harvest coaxed, but the hypothetical disembodied thoughts like orchids in ghostly bloom, ideas rising slender as earth's final crop of wheat. Well, that's interesting. And it's very hard to follow. Like, it's a lot of looping thought. But I think there's meaning there. I don't feel, it's a lush, dense kind of poetry, but it works. It's lush in a good way. So I don't know. So far, nothing that I really change, except for it gets a little bit too sonic and clunky in the way that it's just too mellifluous there a little bit. Vision of pumpkin vines burned on the air. Photographic negative of all that isn't there. Is there more? We have the feet wheat. We have the air there. Are there regular rhymes throughout that I didn't notice at first? Concrete, no. Let. Concrete beats. I don't know. It feels like randomly we throw in some rhymes. And I'm not quite sure if there's a form or consistency to it. Yeah. Hollywood says, this a parachute landing? Yeah. Rose notices, I feel like a poem this dense deserves more time before we judge it. It's true. I'll keep reading. I'm trying to follow it. Vision of pumpkin vines burn the air. Wait, no. Landing made you clumsy, knocking branches, spottable a mile off. Desperate to furl the standard of your body. Unstring its taut crossbow, long-winged albatross at sea since you fledged. The smack of your span among the common finches shocked me from reverie. I lose... So, a long-winged albatross, so that's the tall man. At sea since you fledged, the smack of your span among the common finches shocked me from reverie. I like that idea until the reverie. I'm not sure what reverie is. How that applies, How I long to unbutton the conspicuous skin of you and let your heart float out. A really cool image. What did I know of wings, of bodies, things that beat? But you called me to the kingdom of concrete. Let us be now the ship and the sail, great kite on cross beams, anchor of iron. And when we die, these bodies will not spoil. They will fill us with cups and jewels, jars of oil. They will launch us into the ocean and set us on fire. Yeah. Danette Burmese says, as much as I love imagery, I think it could be culled in this poem. And Morgan Feeney agrees. Yeah. Yeah, I think, as Michael Antrobus says, I suggest moving some of the end rhymes into the middle of the lines. The end rhymes make it, they're very conspicuous when rhymes are end rhymes instead of internal. And the fact that it's inconsistent, to me, I find it off-putting, because I'm looking for the pattern as I'm reading. I'm wanting to hear things at certain places, and that's not the case. And so many don't have rhymes that it feels that I'd like to see them buried instead of out and overt. There's just great images and descriptions here. Someone said, and I don't see it, that it lacks a turn. And that's the thing, too. I was sort of waiting for something to happen. But you called me to the kingdom of concrete. That feels like a turn. It feels like something's happening. So and the but signifies that. And so many times in the volta of a sonnet, you'll see a but. And that's where the turn is, and that's what that structure really is. But you called me to the kingdom of concrete. If we got to see more of that calling and what the kingdom of concrete was, maybe the poem would feel more complete. Ollie Rowland says it could be a lovely sonnet with some editing. I agree too. Jamie Thomas says that's a great idea. Morgan Feeney says, this would be a fab sonnet. Yeah, I guess that's my challenge and prescription. That's a great suggestion. I think it would make a great sonnet. It goes on a little bit too long, as wonderful as the images are. But making it a sonnet would force you to condense that. It would make the rhymes be consistent and fix that problem. And it might be a great sonnet. And so I think so too. Yeah, I agree. Nancy John says the final stanza might be a great ending for a working of what came before. That's interesting too. So anyway, yeah, really lovely sounds in this. A couple things to play with. Roseland says it just feels a bit obscure. And I think if we got to, but you called me to the kingdom of concrete, if we got to what that meant, and we got a better sense of that with just a few more lines, instead of, you called me here and now we're sailing and we're talking about our death already. If we got a sense of what the kingdom of concrete meant, then we would feel that turn more complete, and we would feel like the poem was more finished and resolved for us. So I think it's the lack of extension of that feels a little lost. But if this could be condensed to a sonnet, I think that's a great suggestion. So that's what I'd suggest. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. It's much longer than I thought. Those ended up being good poems. We ended up talking about them for a half an hour. So thanks for sharing those. Very interesting. That was Mary Fontana from Washington. Thanks, Mary. And that's going to wrap up the critique of the week for today. And let's see. Now, this week's guest in the Rattlecast coming up is going to be, where'd it go? Michael Lavers. So Michael Lavers is a wonderful poet. His newest book is The Inextinguishable. His last two books from the University of Tampa Press, which puts out wonderful books. He's also a professor at BYU. Really looking forward to getting to know him more because I don't know him all that well, but I've loved a lot of the poems I've read of his, including some formal poetry, free verse as well. But he's one of those poets that sort of his free verse is informed by his understanding of formal craft, and so that's always nice to hear. That's Michael Lavers, a big episode, number 300. The prompt for this week, and I always forget that I have to pull it up, so hang on. The prompt for this week was something to do with a rondeau, using your name. Write a new rondeau that features an unusual noun that begins with the same letter of your first name. So I'll read it again. It's complicated. Write a new rondeau. So don't. I don't know why. Don't write an old one. There's new poems every time, people. Write a new rondeau that features an unusual noun that begins with the same letter of your first name. So take your first name, that letter, find an unusual noun that starts with that letter, and that's got to be included in this rondeau, okay? And you can look up a rondeau. It's Rondeau. Look that up. You can figure out what a rondeau is. I always have to remind myself it's one that I don't know. It's there's some repetition. It's similar kind of to a villanelle, but the difference I can't remember. So look it up. Write a rondeau. That's your prompt. Michael Lavers is your guest. The regular time, Sunday, July 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend and a happy 4th if you're in the U.S. In the meantime, we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.